Hey guys, ZFR back here once again, and in this video I wanted to finally give my full opinion on Cyberpunk 2077 almost 7 months after this game's release. Now, for those of you who don't remember, back when the game first came out, I never really did give it a full review. I gave it more of a kind of first impressions type deal and just kind of left it at that. Because, you know, I figured the game was in a state so bad, it was kind of hard to really nail down my feelings of how I actually felt about the game. So I didn't want to give it a full review just yet. I decided I was going to give them a little bit of time and see what happened, and I would talk about everything once I felt like I kind of got a good enough feel for the game, and here we are. So, yeah. Basically, in this video, I want to cover whether or not the game is in a state that I enjoy and that I find satisfying enough to recommend to other gamers, other players. And don't worry, I'm not going to make you wait all the way until the end of what is definitely about to be a massive video to give you my answer to this question, because I know people probably hate it when other YouTubers do that. I'm just going to get straight to the point for the people who are here for, you know, just to figure out whether or not they should give the game a try now, or if this is a good time to jump back into the game. Pretty much after 7 months of sinking my teeth into what seems like hundreds of hours of Cyberpunk, and I mean, I've played multiple playthroughs at this point. I think I'm getting ready to start on my 5th playthrough pretty soon. I, at this point, still cannot recommend this game to other gamers who are waiting for a reason to come back. I mean, and there's a lot of reasons why, but the main one is I have to warn everybody who hasn't played Cyberpunk yet or hasn't played it in a while, who wants to kind of, you know, just get a sum up of how it's going. I want to just warn people that I personally at this point do not think this game is going to hit the vision that we got sold before launch. I just think it just isn't going to live up to that pre-launch vision that was sold to us there. I think, unfortunately, this game is going to have to go down a different path and kind of make the best do of what it can. So with that being said, I know I just said a lot there, and I know I made a big claim right here at the end, but pretty much we're going to get into this video, and I'm going to try to explain myself the best I can to all of you. So with that being said, let's get into this, guys. Okay, now before I go any further with this video, I think it's important that I take a little bit of time to make my stance 100% clear on Cyberpunk 2077 and how I feel about the game, how I felt about the game before launch and stuff like that, just to kind of put it into perspective for people that this video is not a video bashing Cyberpunk 2077. It's not a video hating on the game blindly or anything like that, or being nitpicky or any of that stuff. It's a video from someone who is truly a fan of the game, just giving it some honest to God criticism. So with that being said, I am going to take a good little chunk of time out here to talk about this. So if you're not interested in this part of the video, I'm going to put a timestamp up on the screen to kind of tell you where to skip ahead to, so you don't really have to sit through this whole thing. I'll probably also put one in the description. So yeah, that should be popping up right about now. But anyway, in order to kind of go into how I feel about Cyberpunk 2077, you kind of have to go back to 2015 when The Witcher 3 first came out. And pretty much, I played The Witcher 3 on launch. I played it all the way from release up until, pretty much right before Cyberpunk came out. I've been playing that game, replayed it multiple times. And that was my first time interacting with The Witcher as a franchise, or even CD Projekt Red in general as a game developer. So, like many others, I pretty much fell in love with The Witcher 3. It became my favorite game of all time. It still is to this day. I have, personally, for me, I know some people will object strongly, but for me personally, I have never played a game that I liked as much as The Witcher 3. And I've liked a lot of games, but The Witcher 3 for me was just is my favorite game of all time. It's one of the best video games I've ever played. But, it was also the first time I played a massive open world game that really tackled that RPG element in a very mature and lengthy story, in such a unique fashion. Like, I've never really, before that point, was a massive fan of RPGs, and I've never really even played that many open world games up until that point. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've obviously played open world games, but The Witcher 3 was like the first one where I really gained a newfound appreciation for like the open world formula and saw where it can be really cool and really good and stuff. But anyway, given that, the game left its mark on me, obviously. That caused me to go and read a lot of Witcher books, and I saw, how great CD Projekt Red had brought all the content from the books over into the game. I even went back and watched some playthroughs and stuff of the older games because I just was interested in the story, and the writing and stuff was just so good. So pretty much all of this put together really pushed CD Projekt Red up on my list of developers to look out for, because like I really was impressed with how well they adapted another medium of entertainment into video game form, which is something other developers had been trying and failing at for a long time, right? How many bad video game movies or movie video games have we seen fail over the years? It's just not something you see done well often. So that kind of led me to just really be excited for CD Projekt Red's next project, whatever it was. And of course, this is where I got led right to the first Cyberpunk 2077 trailer, the reveal trailer from 2011, which I didn't even know existed back then. But, I pretty much found it, and I was like, oh, this is what they're working on next? Sure, great. And pretty much after that, that just kind of caused my ears to perk up every time I heard something about Cyberpunk 2077 mentioned afterwards. Once we started to see gameplay and other story details, myself, like many others, once again saw that the game we pretty much saw the game as a natural progression of Witcher 3, or I saw it. I don't know how other people might perceived it, but it looked like a very well done natural progression of what they had done well with Witcher 3, but just in a different formula and in a more ambitious package in a way. Like Cyberpunk 2077 was supposed to be a really amazing game, from riding out of Witcher 3 straight into the trailers for this game. I was just really excited, and pretty much this caused me to jump into a lot of Cyberpunk 2077 lore and stuff. I started reading all the original lore and everything, learning about Night City, all of the gangs, all of that. And pretty much, after seeing all that stuff, anybody who's read some of it will know that there's a lot to be excited about mixed in there. And that just kind of led me, and I believe a lot of other fans, to get really excited about what this game could potentially do. Because, I mean, the game already looked cool before you knew anything about it. But once you understood the lore and stuff that is the cyberpunk world, and you understood the type of topics and story that this game could cover, like, there was a lot to be excited with when it came to this game. So yeah, obviously people got very, very hyped for it. Now, as development for the game marched on, CD Projekt Red, obviously they start cutting content from the game, and a bunch of controversy started rising around the game with all of the SJW stuff, all of that. And there was just a bunch of back and forth from every which direction around this game as the development cycle kind of got closer and closer to the end. However, the fan base, I feel like the main core fan base of Cyberpunk 2077 was holding on strong. And, the worst of people from the community were a little skeptical, but they were still excited. Everyone was excited for this game, just about. And it was very easy to believe, or to just think that pretty much, well, look at how well they did with The Witcher's open world game formula, right? Like, we had never seen anything like that before. As long as they take that same formula and apply it to something like Cyberpunk 2077, it should, for the most part, be an easy game to develop, as long as they don't overshoot too much and stuff like that, or shoot themselves in the foot with trying to do too much. It should be good. And this, combined with pretty much the multiple delays that the game got, we thought they were putting all that extra time in to polish everything. People just were like, man, well, come on, this game is going to be launching in a state that's going to be at least enjoyable. That should be a simple enough task for them to perform. But of course, we were all wrong. But yeah, we were wrong. The game launched how it did, and we all know how that went. Now, let's be honest, The Witcher 3's launch wasn't the best either. It was far from perfect, and nobody really ever expected Cyberpunk's launch to be perfect either. I mean, we all knew that with a game like this, from CD Projekt Red, after what we saw with Witcher 3 for the first couple months, we all knew that there was going to be some bugs. We knew that there was going to be a few issues and stuff that probably still needed to be ironed out after launch, due to just the scope and the ambition of the game alone. But upon release, the game was an absolute mess, to put it simply. There were uncountable numbers of bugs. There were minor bugs, game-breaking bugs. Even after accepting a bunch of the content cuts and stuff that CD Projekt Red warned us about prior to release, and this is where a lot of people try to defend the game, saying that they warned us about all of this. But even after accepting, some of the stuff that they told us they were going to be cutting and stuff, the game was still missing mountains of content that was kind of promised to us before the release. And then on top of that, the game had multiple game systems, such as the UI, the inventory, the crafting system, that even the freaking skill tree were all kind of designed on the poor side. They were very kind of poorly designed. I hate to say it like that. Because they look cool and stuff, but ultimately, they didn't quite, they weren't working quite the best. You know what I'm saying? They felt very unpolished, and in some areas, not even finished. This would be followed by months of CDPR not quite hitting the mark with a lot of the stuff they promised afterwards. You know, there was a bunch of disappointing updates. They got hacked, and you know that halted like the development and stuff for a while. Then of course, you know, there was patches and stuff that where the content release dates just weren't being met. Like even just now, like in June, we just missed pretty much a release window for the first free DLC. And you know, people are kind of like, okay, CDPR, what the heck's going on? Like we're supposed to get some free DLC by now. And there's rumors circulating right now where in the game code they did find some stuff from the next update. It looks like it's going to be a massive one, but you know, it's not out yet. So, I mean, we're going to talk about the game as it is right now of the time of me recording this video. But yeah, pretty much looking at how everything is happening, like people just aren't really satisfied with the game at the moment. And this has kind of left a really bad taste in a lot of people's mouths over the past couple of months. Okay, and sorry about that section being so long, guys, but I did really want to, you know, just kind of make it clear that I don't hate Cyberpunk 2077. Now, moving on to the actual review, I know some people might say that it's foolish to get hyped for a game before it launches. Some might say that it's completely unfair to hold a game to the standard of a completely different one, even if it's made by the same company. Usually I would agree with these statements, but not this time. I truly believe that the backlash for Cyberpunk 2077 has nothing to do with an overhyped vision of the game that players and gamers and people kind of formed in their own minds. And instead, I believe it has everything to do with what we were told we were going to be getting, what was promised to us. And I believe people have very reasonable expectations based off of all of that. And unfortunately, it simply fails to meet with those expectations, with or without the bugs and the glitches and all the technical problems that the game has. I believe the problems people have with Cyberpunk 2077, I believe it's obvious, it's been made obvious that it goes much deeper than that. So finally, let's get into the interesting part of the review. Let's talk about the story. Now, by no means does Cyberpunk 2077 have a bad story. As a matter of fact, the story, in my opinion, is the best and most polished part of this game. The game has, for the most part, compelling characters that are all great. And honestly, it's a lot of their side quests and mini stories and how V interacts with them that carry most of this game on its back, in my opinion. I really think the story is one of the more polished aspects of Cyberpunk. However, for this video, I don't really want to focus on the quality of the story or what I even liked about it, because the quality itself isn't really where my problem with the narrative lies. It's more so the way the story was delivered to the player that I have a problem with. We were told multiple times before the launch of Cyberpunk 2077 that the story would be that of a less linear, more kind of open, and even classic style of RPG, even more so than The Witcher 3, so basically a lot more freedom. This kind of implied to people that they could expect something similar to Skyrim or Fallout, where you could create your character from scratch, customize them throughout the experience, and make all these crazy choices with them that would heavily change the game's story, the tone, the structure of the overall narrative, all that crazy stuff. pretty much, in the words of CD Projekt Red themselves, this would be what they called a branching narrative. This is clearly not what the game is. Okay, it ended up being even more linear than Witcher 3, with many of the different dialogue choices in the game resulting in the same outcome. You just don't have the option of completely betraying any of the side characters. There's pretty much a complete lack of reoccurring interaction with different factions like the gangs or the NCPD or all the different ones in the city and stuff, or even corporations, to be honest with you. And of course, there's no game-changing consequences for anything, whether it being for being too nice in a city that kind of thrives on people undercutting each other all the time, or pretty much you being a complete cyber psycho and killing everything in your path. No characters have reactions to any of the actions that V takes throughout the narrative, and at least none that are narrative shifting, right? And pretty much that really kind of, in my opinion, halts a lot of the type of character development and even the narrative storytelling I was hoping to get in a Cyberpunk, where it would be a RPG instead of like a very linear narrative like it is. Because of this, V isn't what I would call a bad protagonist, but instead a much more neutral and linear one, and I think we all thought he or she would be. I mean, I had personally wished for the type of story that gave us more options to make V out to be a wide range of things. Anything from, I got a couple examples written down here. I like, it would have been cool to have been able to make our main character into just a simple mercenary, kind of like they are. A money-hungry corporal, a free-spirited nomad, a reckless street kid, an honorable samurai. Even a fame-seeking bandit would have been cool in this type of story or narrative or in this world and setting. But instead, V is just V. I mean, he's kind of charming, but at the same time, for the most part, he's just an unprofessional mercenary that doesn't change into anything much. But I mean, I guess he kind of becomes a more famous unprofessional mercenary by the end of the game. I want to say, but in the end, it all really is a letdown when put up against the true RPG CDPR kind of told us this game was going to be. I just personally found it kind of disappointing for the most part. Also, there's rumors about the game's narrative being completely restricted around Johnny Silverhand, pretty much reconstructed entirely. Like, apparently people think that there was way more to the story than there is in the now original product that we got. However, a lot of people believe that they kind of went back and changed a lot of stuff to fit Keanu Reeves in as much as they could as Johnny Silverhand. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on this because it's been discussed by so many people. I'll just say that I think that it's probably true and that I would too have preferred a narrative that was more focused on V and his connection with other characters in the world rather than with Johnny. I personally think that was one of the weaker stories in the game. Although an interesting one, I don't think it's a bad idea. I just didn't think it was enough to carry an entire main plot, in my opinion. Okay, now that we've talked about the story, let's now talk about something else CD Projekt Red is really well known for after Witcher 3. The world, the open world. And in this case, the setting is Night City, of course. And now, I'm sure we're all in agreement that Night City is very graphically amazing. It looks amazing graphically. However, outside that, it leaves a lot to be desired. It's hard not to be disappointed when coming off of something like The Witcher 3's quest design, which filled the world with a lot of handcrafted, well thought out, and executed side missions that filled the world and made it feel alive outside of Geralt himself. The case just isn't the same with Cyberpunk 2077's missions. I mean, sure, they have unique little side stories here and there for some of the little side missions and stuff. However, I mean, for the most part, a lot of the smaller stuff, even when you're going to the little crime scenes and stuff like that, a lot of the story for those things are told through data chips. And yeah, they're usually cool and well written and thought out. However, how many times does it really need to be said? Players want to be told this kind of stuff through real game, like in real time, in game. Even the small stuff, right? I mean, it's the basic rule of writing of show and don't tell. I mean, who wants to stop in the middle of an action game to read a book, pretty much? I mean, unless you incorporate it into something interesting like a treasure hunt of some kind or even a puzzle. I mean, you know, kind of something like how Last of Us always does. Who wants to really do it? I mean, while they're playing Cyberpunk, no one, right? But anyway, back to Night City. Another thing that I recently kind of noticed and it's been brought to my attention, I've seen a couple posts kind of passing around a Reddit post about it. But the city has no NPC conversations or dialogue as you walk by. It has no sounds of busy traffic as you roam the city, no ads or vendors that directly interact with you and try to get you to buy something. The city simply doesn't feel anywhere near as alive as it looks, and that's a problem, guys. And yeah, I mean, this is something I hope they honestly work on in the future. Like, I mean, the sound design for the city could be a little bit better. Like I was just saying, like there's just not a lot of little details thrown in here to kind of make it feel extra alive. And they don't need to go too crazy. Like, I hear some people still asking them to make it to where you can sit down and actually shop and, you know, like, play the food and all that, like, in real time. I don't know about all that. Like, and I might make a video about that later on. I don't know about all that. I do hear some people giving some bad advice what they want to see in a game, I think. But at the same time, it would be nice if they kind of expounded on some of the things that they did. Okay, so finally, let's move on to the big one, the gameplay. Now, the gameplay, in my opinion, is actually one of the saving graces of Cyberpunk 2077. However, a few systems surrounding it could use some work. For instance, the loot system, as I'm sure you all know by now, in my humble opinion, is trash. I mean, I would much prefer a more simple system where you gain loot in a more meaningful way and pick up items only once, giving you the option to use and customize them as you like throughout the rest of the game. This, of course, would obviously mean CDPR would need to make all loot a bit harder to get, which would mean a much more complex development cycle for the team. Hence, why we have, I can't get the words out. This is why we have the colored-based loot system in a lot of these games, not just in Cyberpunk. It's a much easier system to implement. And for those of you who don't usually watch me, it's my opinion. I have the same opinion for every game that's a kind of a looter-shooter based game. I mean, you can go back and watch some of my earlier videos on it, but it's basically, in my opinion, a lazy loot system that lives on the back of, I hate to say it like this, but even lazier game design. I mean, I just don't like these loot systems. It's pretty much the easy way out for developers to put you know, kind of a reason in the game for you to keep playing and pretty much rewards for you to continue to earn throughout the game. I don't like it. I feel like it's a very lazy, unthought out system. And like I said, if you don't understand what I mean, I have other videos on that. I even have an entire loot system video for Cyberpunk 2077 where I break down why I don't like it. So other than that, fixing the skill tree perks that still don't work is another thing they need to do. And a lot of them are some of those are, I believe, are still just useless. But other than that, the gameplay loop for me is fine. And don't get me wrong, there's still other things that they need to fix. Like, I'm sure you guys have all noticed that the crafting system has gone through a few changes here and there and probably could still use a few more tweaks. Like, the economy, I believe, is still a little wonky for it, but hopefully they continue to work on that. And then obviously the inventory, a lot of people are complaining about that. So it's a lot of smaller things like that in terms of gameplay, or just like the game in general while you're playing, that I think is kind of sucks. Like, I think the main thing about the gameplay that they need to work on improving is like the different things you might have to do in game to kind of break up the gameplay. Like, even when you're switching weapons and stuff, like, they need to make a lot of it a lot more snappy and just more easy access, easy to change, easy to go into your inventory and get out. They just need to work on that a lot more. Okay, so that for the most part covers most of what I want to say about Cyberpunk 2077. Now, I know that there's going to be a lot of people that will watch this video and they'll declare that I hate the game or that I just want to complain about it for views, but that's not the truth here. I mean, I love Cyberpunk 2077, I really do. I've been playing it all year and I haven't even stopped supporting the developers and stuff throughout any of this. However, and I plan to keep doing the same going forward, right? However, this is just a tough love and criticism that they're going to need in order to get this game, in a better place than it is, in a better state than it is. I think that the game just right now does need and even somewhat deserves some of the tough love and criticism that it gets from so many people. And don't get me wrong, like, the game is fun, the gameplay is fun, the story and narrative is good and compelling, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good here. There's a lot of good that can be built upon. The graphics aren't bad. The open world looks good, but there's just a lot of the smaller stuff that's attached to all of that I just mentioned, and the kind of presentation and the structure of everything that's kind of a little on the weak side. So yeah, overall the game is fun and I wouldn't exactly say that it's not worth buying. However, it still isn't where I would personally like it to be, right? I mean, as you can tell, the game's list of issues and stuff is pretty massive, and I didn't even touch on it all in this video because I want to stay focused a little bit more on the stuff that I feel like isn't getting as much attention by a lot of people. I think that, I just want to warn some people about some of the less talked about things when it comes to this game that, they might not be seeing in other reviews and stuff. So I'm going to keep it 100% real with everyone watching this review, trying to decide if they should buy Cyberpunk or not, or if they should come back to it, whatever, or wherever you're at with it, what you should do going forward. I personally believe, and to be honest, I don't even know if it's possible for CDPR to get this game to the point we all thought it was going to be at and wanted it to be at when it released. I'm going to keep it 100% real, guys. The game is just a completely different game than the one that was kind of advertised to us. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's cool. It's a cool game still. It's fun, and it has a lot of potential that can still be flushed out. I'm not saying that by no means it can't get close to that vision, but I just don't know. Some of the things that they advertised before launch and the way they advertise it, I just think it would be a lot of work for them to try and turn what we currently have with Cyberpunk 2077 into that pre-launch vision everybody had of the game. And I personally think it would probably just be smarter for them to, try and work with what they already have in the game, work with some of those assets, add some new content, obviously, on top of it, and just try to make the best of what we have. I think if they do that, and they do that well enough, and they stick to the more simple route of updating and kind of giving players a little bit of what they want, while also kind of just making the improvements that the game probably definitely needs, I think this game can eventually become a 10 out of 10 game. However, for right now, in the state it's currently in, and keep in mind, this is after the last patch, so the game currently runs pretty good on PlayStation 4, 5, and PC. Well, probably not perfect, but it runs better than it used to, right? And unfortunately, I have to still give this game a 6.5 out of 10. And I thought about this a lot, and I pretty much based this off of how much enjoyment am I getting out of Cyberpunk right now compared to what I think it will probably give me in the future once they add certain things in. And I gotta keep it real. Right now, there's a lot of stuff that I still feel like is missing from this game that this game could still use. So with that being said, I think a 6.5 is right around the area where it's at right now. It's slightly above average, right? It's a good game. It's a fun game. But and to be honest, a lot of technical issues and stuff are finally being kind of polished out. And, the game is starting to come into its stride just now. However, we haven't really seen things go to that level yet where I feel comfortable giving this game a really high score just yet. I enjoy it. I love the game, and I give it this score because I want to see it grow in the future. So yeah, that's how I feel about Cyberpunk 2077. And I'm probably going to do a bunch of reviews and stuff for all the new patches and DLCs that come out. I promise they won't be as long as this one, because this was a long video, guys. But yeah, overall, thanks so much for watching, everybody. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to support this video and this channel by hitting the like button, the subscribe button, and definitely leave a comment down below, because I am definitely interested to see what you guys think about this. So yeah, do all that great stuff, and I will see you guys the next time. ZFR out, guys.